Hello, everyone. I don't think it's on. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I hope you enjoyed it. And welcome to our first session of the afternoon, all about the patients, how to better engage and empower patients. And I'm thrilled to welcome on stage my teammate, Premal Kamdar, Director of Digital Health Product Management, who's going to talk about early detection of cytokine release syndrome to increase accessibility for patients undergoing CAR T-cell therapy and open up what's going to be an awesome panel. Thanks, Premal.
Thanks, Lauren. So, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone enjoyed the fantastic sessions this morning and networking and lunch. It's an honor to be here. And first and foremost, I'd want to congratulate Lauren and the entire organizing team for putting together such a great event. So my name is Premal Kamdar, and I've had the privilege for the past 2.5 years to work in the space of CAR T therapy delivery. The focus has been on how can we leverage digital health tools and technologies to improve patient access, patient equity, and patient safety. At BMS, one of our CAR T objectives is to accelerate the CAR T class expansion. We know that patients are waiting for these transformative therapies, and as you can see on the slide, there's still a significant unmet need. 80% of patients who are eligible for CAR T therapy are still not receiving it today. Now, there are a myriad of reasons why eligible patients are not receiving CAR T therapy. One of the important reasons is due to the safety monitoring requirements associated with this therapy. As we've heard earlier today, due to side effects like CRS, cytokine release syndrome, and ICANS, a type of neurotoxicity associated with this condition, there's a lot of patient safety monitoring burden for patients, their families, health systems, and providers. In fact, 50% of the patients, up to 50% of the patients who receive CAR T therapy are forced to relocate closer to the center where they are receiving care. There are also many patients who are not referred for CAR T therapy, and in other circumstances, patients opt or choose not to select CAR T therapy due to logistical challenges or perceived burdens associated with these side effects associated with the treatment. So that kind of begs the question for us. How do we maintain patient safety without limiting patient access? And that's where remote patient monitoring has gained traction in the last couple of years. We are seeing many leading sites adopting and embracing this technology through pilots, proof of concepts, and in some cases, even becoming standard of care now. And for us here, we want to leverage this momentum. We want to accelerate RPM adoption and also find ways to take it to the next level. And so the panel that we're going to have in a few minutes will tell you the ground reality, the ground truth of what's happening today and where the opportunities lie. BMS is also actively investing in this space around improving patient access, getting more patients on CAR Ts, supporting outpatient infusions and outpatient monitoring. We are investing in wearable technologies and triaging algorithms, both in our clinical programs and in the commercial setting. We are working towards the next generation of capabilities. We know standard monitoring is there with wearable devices that capture things like heart rate, respiration rate, temperature, and so forth. And the idea now is, how can we leverage these insights to take us to the next level so that we can identify CRS even earlier? Because as we know, CRS has the potential to be a life-threatening condition. But if you are able to identify it early, there are interventions in place which can make it more manageable. And so BMS is investing in this technology for patients, to enable patients to be closer to home or even at home, for providers to give them the insights they need to escalate care more efficiently and appropriately. And then when we think about health systems, you can imagine that more outpatient care, outpatient monitoring will result in less inpatient hospitalizations, ICU visits, and through tools or digital wrappers like telehealth and virtual care, the ability to have more at-home virtual visits. So that's where the future is. That's how we can improve throughput for treatment centers, and that's how we can get more CAR-T out to patients. So now I'd like to call the esteemed panelists on stage and my colleague Sibel, who is going to moderate this panel. So if they can please all join us on stage. And in this panel, I want you to think about 4 things that hopefully you will take away. One is, again, reinforcing what is the clinical need here. 2, you guys will learn more about what is the current state. What is happening today with RPM technologies? How is the ecosystem embracing it? Number 3, it's learning about what is working well. And number 4, what is the future? So, Sibel and team.
All right. Yeah. Come on up, maybe. All right. Thank you, Premal, for the introduction. I think we're going to stick to the format that we had early in the morning, and everyone from the panel is going to introduce themselves. John, shall we start with you and then?
Hey everyone, my name is John Calhoun. I'm the global program lead for the ida-cel and ROS-L CAR-T programs in multiple myeloma here at BMS.
Hi everyone, my name is Sindhu Pandit. I am here with Best Buy Health. I'm a medical director there, as well as a practicing physical medicine and rehab doc.
And I'm Adriana Rossi. I head the CAR-T program for myeloma at Mount Sinai.
And I'm Sibel. I'm a colleague of Premal. I'm part of the digital health team responsible for hematology and cell therapy. So we were supposed to have a patient here. Unfortunately, she got sick and could not make it, but it's not for the lack of, we tried. And it would have been great, obviously, to hear her perspective. She is a lymphoma survivor who has received Breyanzi in 2021 and has been in full remission since. And the piece that would have been really interesting to hear from her is that she lives in Jersey City, but had to get treatment in Manhattan and was relocating for 45 days into the city to be really close to the site. Now we have a physician here who, right, we've talked about this before, who gets to speak to patients on a daily basis, which is very different from us. And I think, Adriana, maybe you could help us, just walk us through what it means for patients, what it means for you. Then these CAR-T eligible patients come to you at Mount Sinai, they undergo a CAR-T treatment.
Yeah, and I'm very sad you don't get to hear from a patient because I do think that's a privilege of my day-to-day life. But at least I can share from our point of view, and we have been doing CAR-T since 2017. And I think part of the thing is how much it's changed just in that time. So it's a very rapidly evolving experience. But in general, there are different products, different disease states. So the journeys are a little different. And as we were talking, I think Manhattan has its own special obstacles that maybe are not universal to the rest of the country. But patients do need to be near their center. So just starting from there, right? I have patients who can walk over to our center, but most of them will come from out of state or from other parts of New York. And they have to come for a consult. They then have to have a separate trip to collect these T cells, which is usually a day or 2. But they need to have a central line placed, which is a procedure, then sit and have the cells collected for most of a day. Then they have to go back to where they came from. Once the cells have been manufactured, they come back, and that's the part where they stay with us for a minimum of 30 days usually. And it's not just them, but they need to have a caregiver 24 hours a day. So we're disrupting these 2 lives for a minimum of a month, if all goes well. If there are other detours, it could be longer. And it mostly is driven by CRS, which is the primary toxicity of CAR-T. So for those of you who maybe don't do this every day, we genetically engineer these cells to attack tumors as though they were an infection. So we are trying to create inflammation. We are trying to keep it contained and not make it life-threatening and not let it cause all the nerve toxicities that we see. So a lot of it is time-sensitive mitigation of these potential toxicities.
Thank you so much for that. So you've led recently an investigator-sponsored study involving 30 CAR-T patients using wearables. Can you maybe just talk a bit about that work and some of the insights that you've gained from this?
Yes, so that's, again, because when we started, CAR-T was 100% always inpatient, and we can talk about all the downstream events of that. But yes, so when we started, there was a minimum 14-day stay, which was usually a little bit longer. And the biggest driver is this being able to detect CRS and respond within minutes, because you just don't know how fast it can expand. It's kind of like a forest fire situation. And while we still do 100% fully inpatient CAR-Ts, the study had the wearable at the same time. So hospital policy is vital signs every 4 hours, which most patients already think is quite a lot because we wake them up every 4 hours overnight. But they would, in addition to that, wear a wearable from admission through those first 14 days. And out of the 30 patients, 2 of them didn't wear them 50% of the time. So I think the wearability is definitely one of the learning lessons. But the vast majority wore it, liked it, felt reassured by it. And at the end of the day, we had about 100-minute lead time to detecting the vital sign abnormalities. And CRS requires a fever. It may then also develop blood pressure and pulse and oxygen, further complications, but really the fever is the easy and first detected vital. So it was, I think, at least for us, our intention and motivation was to try to then use this to develop an outpatient program, because if you have 100 minutes, the patient can be 30 minutes away and still get to us in time for an intervention.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's take a step forward and picture that we would have such a remote monitoring capability as a standard of care at your hospital. What would that mean? What would that unlock?
Yeah, it would go a great deal of room, I think, because many patients, one of the barriers to coming to CAR-T, again, they are eligible. Either the doctor isn't sending them, they don't have the caregiver to come and stay with them, or they're outside of our 30-minute radius. So I think for patients, it would definitely increase the number of patients who would then be able to get these really incredible therapies. For physicians, it would give us the peace of mind of, I can get and intervene in time. I think for the hospital system, we were talking about this bed availability. At Sinai, I have patients who easily spend 3 days in the emergency room because they can't, there is no bed to take the patient upstairs, because our beds are full of patients that are getting monitored for weeks. So I think it would be a huge impact for patients, providers, and the health system.
Thank you for sharing that. And in terms of next steps, anything you can share? What do you think is for you and where you're going with the research and understanding? What do you think is a good next step?
I think the biggest thing is to recognize we currently have 2 approved products in myeloma, but I expect in the next 5 years that's going to quadruple, the number of things that we have in the pipeline and all the clinical trials. I think CAR-T is going to expand to other disease states. It's going to be a bigger and bigger part of our program. So it's not sustainable to do it the way we do it. We need to find tools to make it viable to use it as an outpatient. And again, having the wearability and buy-in from the patients, having a reliable source so that as physicians we know when something triggers, there will be someone at the other side and that patient will get the attention they need, troubleshooting all the steps, I think is all room for us to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a perfect segue to go to you, Sindhu, because you are working for Best Buy Health, which is a technology provider. And I think the work that you're doing shows that already today, this is feasible, right? It's not without its challenges. You're going to talk about these as well. But you are right now working and collaborating with Well-Known Cancer Institute as well. Do you want to share some of that work and how the setup works there, in daily life?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And Adriana, fantastic setup. I mean, there's so much happening in this space, and I think it's important for us to keep in mind that patient experience, but also that clinician experience that you just also touched on. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why I actually came over to Best Buy. For those of you who aren't familiar, Best Buy Health is a part of Best Buy, and yes, it's the electronic retailer down the street with the big yellow tag, and I know I don't have a blue shirt, but I am very proud to be at Best Buy. I did grow up going to a Best Buy. I don't know if anyone else there did, but it was a pastime that was shared with my dad and I. But the way I think about it is you take the core competencies of Best Buy Enterprise, big Best Buy, logistics, orchestration, customer service, et cetera, and bring that to health and kind of orient that into a partnership to support entities across the healthcare and life sciences ecosystem. I think it makes natural sense. Best Buy has been in this space for a while and has only continued to grow. And we have a lot of partnerships with healthcare organizations, a lot of AMCs, as well as life sciences organizations, where we're very clear in being that partner to help them deliver the care they are delivering or run the trials or any other element of that. We are surfacing the data and hopefully the information needed for those teams to make decisions that they need to make. So specifically, we are working with different centers taking the CAR-T program into the home at various stages. Some are a little bit earlier on, some are a lot more mature in their program. One of the ones that's a little bit further out and quite mature is our partnership with Sarah Cannon, and actually my colleague has that study if you're interested in the back. And the reason I bring that up is because I think everyone starts at a different stage in doing this, because it isn't a one-size-fits-all program. I think you have to be really cognizant of not just where the academic center or the organization is with their CAR-T program, but also where are their patients? And I mean that both from cultural sense, from a regional sense, as someone mentioned earlier, thinking about accessibility, what type of drive is involved in getting them to the home center. And so I think the important thing to take away is that the technology is there. We actually have a wearable device that we use, which gives you continuous monitoring of a lot of the vitals that Adriana spoke to, and that is an important part of it. But some organizations have, as I said, a much more mature program, or maybe they're starting at a different spot and they just want the technology. But with other organizations, we actually have a monitoring service that we work to kind of monitor all of those vitals, all those data streams coming in, almost like a security system would monitor, and kind of look for out-of-range values and escalate that as dictated by a protocol that's written in conjunction with our partner organization, and allow that decision making to happen within the context of that individual receiving that treatment protocol. So it isn't that there's a temp of 99 and everyone's going to act the same way, or the patient is going to receive the same action. So the way I usually describe it is we work with our partner organizations to determine a population level plan, and then work with them to figure out when it needs to be personalized down to the individual receiving that care. So for example, if that 99 is within the scope of someone receiving CAR-T, then we are not ordering an antipyretic or any sort of intervention for that. We're escalating to the clinical team, allowing them to make that decision. And the last piece I'll say about all of this is that the other component of this larger scale offering we have to support patients undergoing kind of this really what can be an onerous experience, but also a very hopeful experience. We also have Geek Squad. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Geek Squad. They hung my TV. But there's actually an element of Geek Squad that we call Geek Squad for Health. And those individuals are actually trained to work with individuals that are in a vulnerable state. They go through empathy training and other things to make sure that they are able to work with those individuals in their home home, but they're navigating and troubleshooting technology associated with their health program that has been again, developed in conjunction with our partner organizations. So one thing I hope this brings to life is that yes, there's technology, and yes, there's a lot of data and a lot of interpretation of that data happening, but the human is very much there. And I think that's really important when we're thinking about healthcare.
And that means, if I understand right, there's the variable component, there is like the thresholds that it triggers, but then there is this call center that you have where you have nurses who triage so that your team would not have to sit there and monitor all the 1,000 notifications that come through. And then you have also the Geek Squad, and I think they're there for educational purposes, right?
Yeah, we say it's like over the threshold, so they can connect the devices, troubleshoot connectivity issues, and then educate on how to use the device, wear the device, and then usually there's family members there as well. Yeah. So they handle that, and then we actually, in addition to our monitoring team, which are clinicians, or they have clinical backgrounds, we actually have a team that we can escalate to in that moment if it's actually a technical issue. And this is like someone bringing me a phone saying my thing isn't connecting to my phone, and I'm sitting in clinic and I don't know either. That's a great question. So in this case, we actually have a team that we can escalate to in the middle of the night if for some reason we think that it's a technical issue, so a technical alarm versus a clinical alarm.
Yeah. That's really helpful. And I think that's a recurring theme from the previous panel as well, is this adoption and coaching people and not just assuming that everyone knows how to figure out things. And I think that's really relevant.
I think the last piece I'll write there, say to that, is that there's a digital literacy, there's a health literacy, but there's also just frank anxiety when you're going through something like this and something beeps at you. It's really difficult to ascertain how quote unquote important that beep is. And when you're undergoing something as sensitive as CAR-T, that could elicit a higher heart rate, and that could elicit a lot of other things that we then start to interpret. And when we're in the facilities, we just walk by these patients and then check in on them or get like a gut check of what's happening. In the home, that's a little bit harder. So we're able to kind of put those elements together for our colleagues.
Yeah. And last question to you, and also to you, and before we go to John, is what can you say about the ecosystem readiness and how has it evolved in the last few years for solutions like that? I don't know who wants to start.
Mostly going to be you, so I'll put in my 2 cents. Remembering my focus is myeloma, and the average age of diagnosis is 69, and our oldest CAR-T patient to date was 89. These are definitely, they are easily intimidated by the tech idea. But again, the tools that we had, there was a team who came, educated the patient, educated the family, and normalized it in clinic before they ever saw it, in the hospital setting, which is where they then experienced it. And I think it goes to your point of like having that village to, this is the technical people will help you, these are the medical people will help you, like any kind of issue, there is someone to tap in. That has made it easier for them. For the health system, I think it's similar. I was like, okay, it's going to beep. What's going to happen when it beeps? I don't want my cell phone beeping for all of them. So I think, generally, as practitioners, we're very eager. As patients, I think it just needs education, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I think what I'll say is that it's a cultural shift that we've seen. The technology has gotten better, but I honestly think it's cultural and education and exposure. A lot of I test stuff out on my parents all the time. Like they're fine with Netflix, but they can't remember 10% of a conversation they have with their Medicare Advantage program. So I think it's not all the same, and I think we can't be like it can't be a monolithic approach. We really need to think again about what's most appropriate for the population and ensure that we are troubleshooting to find where the problem spots may be, friction points, and then creating on-ramps and off-ramps as appropriate to serve both those that are delivering care as well as receiving the care.
All right, thank you. So John, to you. Basically, in a high level, why should BMS care about this and help solve this problem? And specifically, you've championed from the very get-go for a developmental CAR-T asset that we include variables in the very first studies already. At the moment, that's not yet an effort that gives us any tangible study endpoints, right, by design. It is an added burden at the moment. So why do you see this as a good investment for us as BMS?
Yeah, I mean, look, from a personal perspective, when my wife was young, her mother was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. At that time, the first oncologist said, go home and enjoy the 6 months you've got with your family. A second oncologist said, hey, I'm doing a clinical trial on a drug called rituximab that was an investigational agent at the time. That then became the standard of care. And if you fast forward to 2004, by the time my mom was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, that was a successful treatment. Those women got 20 years of added life out of that one innovation. And in my professional life, I started early in grad school working on human embryonic stem cells, and our goal was to try to make the types of cells that are lost in diseases like Parkinson's and diabetes. And that sparked this passion for seeing science translate from the bench to the bedside. And I joined industry, as many of us at BMS have, to pursue that passion. Over the course of my career, I've seen that if you don't properly support the adoption of that technology, the innovation, that incredibly long and arduous and expensive and time-consuming and resource-intensive effort that's often over a decade to bring an innovation to market could be for nothing, right? And if we think about that statistic, the 2 in 10 patients, I think as a leader in cell therapy, the burden is on us to make those investments, even at risk, to see if we can change the course of adoption of CAR-T. I won't bore you with all the details, but if you go to bms.com, we have a cell therapy fact sheet. In addition to the 2 of 10, it's worth noting CAR-T is available in only 4% of U.S. healthcare centers today. Patients with income of less than $40,000 are 60% less likely to receive a CAR-T than those who make over $100,000. And data published recently says Black and Hispanic patients are 50% less likely to receive a CAR-T treatment. You know, we talk about Manhattan. I grew up in the rural South. Your average driving time to a major academic medical center is 4, 5, 6 hours. So 30 minutes into Manhattan from Jersey City is not so bad if you're thinking about trying to get from rural South Georgia to Atlanta or another place. And we're committed to expanding the ability to have these important treatments reach the patients who need them the most. And if we don't make that investment, I don't think it'll become a reality. So if we can find a way to untether these patients and their caregivers from that strict requirement to avoid a potentially serious and life-threatening complication, then the onus is on us to try to do that.
And I have many more questions, but I think we're out of time. Is that correct?
Yes, unfortunately.
So, thank you so much to the panelists.
There will be another networking break. Thank you all.